Good morning. Welcome to the May MNRCC meeting. So glad to see all of us here in attendance. And I'll ask for an approval first. I'll make the motion to approve the agenda for today. Got a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. And we approve them all at one time.
You can
By
approve
one,
all the
by
agendas.
all the agendas and the meeting minutes that we had. I'll make that motion to get a second.
Second.
Okay, all in favor? All right, now that that's done, chair's report has been distributed. Veteran Wilson did a very nice job on this engine. Well,
Hi, it's IT.
Yeah.
We've managed to connect something.
All right.
Okay, thank you.
like the number. So anyway, if there's any questions on the report, I'm happy to answer them. Okay, let's then go to Lisa for the executive budget overview.
Okay, we have great news, and Andy, feel free to chime in here. We have a budget. The MTA, as you know, had some significant budget shortfalls and fiscal cliff, fiscal tsunami, pick a name, but some major issues facing it for over the next 4 years. And the governor had made some proposals, the state legislature, each of the houses had made some proposals. They came together slowly but surely, but came forth with funding mechanisms so that the MTA will be, as long as nothing further amiss happens, fully funded for the next 4 years. And that through the strength of the suburbs, the payroll mobility tax will be paid for by the city through city businesses, not the businesses outside of the city. Several policy matters that were sticking points and still are matters of contention are still open for conversation, including the housing compact, including this may not rise to that level for everybody, but it does for us, and we're continuing to pursue it. Voting membership for our board members, and several other issues that are still being discussed in Albany that are less MTA related. But still TBD is how things like the 5 free bus routes in New York City are going to be determined. That's one in each borough. There's been a lot of conversation about that, including whether there'll be some for new bus routes, if they're going to be in areas to improve connectivity or in subway/commuter rail deserts, to subways/commuter rails, which would be something that we would certainly advocate for. But what seems clear is that they will not be on parallel routes, so that you can say, oh, look, I can take this bus for free instead of that bus that I have to pay for. So, or give the impression that every bus is free. That's a major concern. And do you want to jump in on anything?
I think you got that one pretty well so far.
Great.
There's still a lot to be determined.
Yeah, there's still things that are outstanding, but the most outstanding in a good way is that the MTA is going to be in good shape. Speaking of money and buses, the fare evasion panel report came out yesterday. I was very pleased and proud to have served on that blue ribbon
You
panel.
had a prominent position in the press event.
Yes, I did not choose that. It was given to me. My elbows were not sharpened yesterday. They were there. I was put there. But $690 million a year is lost to fare evasion, and more than a third of that is on buses. So looking at strategies for how to recoup those funds without criminalizing poverty, without doing things that are going to put MTA personnel at risk, and ways to allow people who can't pay the fare to be able to pay the fare. are all in the mix. Educating riders on why it's so important that they pay the fare, including students, and increasing students' access to more rides on Metro cards and integrating Omni sooner are all some of the recommendations. It's available online. And I encourage you to take a look at it. The executive summary is encapsulates it nicely, so you don't have to read the several hundred-page report. For the commuter rails, some of the recommendations were streamlining the number of ticket types. And that dovetails nicely with work that Ryan is working on with Kara and our former associate director Liam on some fair policy recommendations. So that will be that is very timely and probably be the topic of the conversation at our PDAs meeting in a couple of weeks too. Congestion pricing has reached its next level, which is good news for the MTA's capital plan. So what that means for us, the big picture us, is that a draft environmental assessment has been accepted and put forth for a public notice of a period of 30-day public notice.
Public availability.
Thank you, public availability, yeah. And a draft FONSI, which is a draft finding of no significant impact, has been put out. After the 30 days, the federal government will likely put out the final FONSI. They may require the MTA to respond to comments that have been received. Even though this is not a public comment period, this is a term that we heard yesterday that I hadn't actually heard. Pilot program. The federal government considers this to be a national pilot program. So they're looking at this a little bit differently.
Are there any extra benefits we get because they call this?
Oh, yeah, we get to have extra scrutiny.
Okay.
We get to have the initial lawsuits. We get to have the push-pull with New Jersey and Staten Island. Benefit or whatever. We get to be the guinea pigs in all of this. But I think that in the end, that what the benefit is cleaner air, less traffic, and $15 billion once bonded for our capital program, which is really going to be essential for not just a state of good repair, but new rolling stock, which we know we need, new signalization, which we know we need, projects like pen access, which we know we need. So it's all in all good news, and people like George Latimer have supported it. Even with Torres has come around, because of the mitigation measures that were included in the draft environmental assessment or the environmental assessment that was released, that came with a letter of legal sufficiency, and the draft FONSI, which makes me go A. So the mitigation measures are $155 million worth of actions and activities that include things that can be put in place, not just in the Bronx and areas that have some areas of impact in New York City, but in New Jersey too. So we, as the staff, are working with a coalition of advocates, the Congestion Pricing Now Coalition, which has been involved since, well, some have been involved since before Mike Bloomberg got involved, to really ensure that the positive messaging is put out, but also the truth and the facts. So, there is definitely pushback. The Traffic Mobility Review Board will meet after the final FONSI is issued in June. So that's when the conversation of executives really gets into play. There have been a lot of conversations of exemptions, including everywhere I go, everywhere you guys go. These people should be exempted. Those people should be exempted. people, on motorcycles should be exempted, people with clean past vehicles that are made in the United States and are only, I heard this morning in my gym, no lie. So these are the kind of things.
Because they know who you are because.
Because they know who I am.
Okay.
But these are the kinds of conversations that will come up at the Crane's breakfast that Karen and I went to yesterday. It was the bus operators who want exemptions because they take 55 cars off the road. So I'm so glad not to have to sit on that board. Randy, you might be glad you don't have to vote it until after the board votes, but
buses. These are charter buses you're talking about.
no, that's like Academy bus. It's
Those-
the buses that
Oh,
come
yeah,
from
of course, yeah, New Jersey buses.
the interstate commerce bus, well, the interstate buses.
Yeah.
Under several of the different scenarios, MTA buses could have also been charged for coming into the congestion
Which ones?
zone. MTA buses, including city buses. So they're, they had to consider all the different scenarios, and what it would mean to travel.
If I get money out of my pocket, and put it in this one.
Yeah, exactly.
So we're not paying tolls currently the TBTA.
$10 a day.
Yeah.
Goes into
Um,
that.
Yeah, right. So, right, but those buses, but the buses like Academy bus pay, to go through tunnels and over the bridges.
Yeah.
So now if they go through the tunnels and over the bridges, they would, conceivably get the break that you would get if you or I went to do a tunnel over.
Yeah, but if they're gonna go directly into the Port Authority, they should be covered by not having to.
That is a conversation for TMRB that I'm very happy I'm not sitting on. So, these are all conversations, and it's very possible that if TMRB comes up with a scenario that is not one of the ones that has been modeled already, because they can still pick and choose, and there might be some additional modeling that happens, so,
They have a model team that will be working with them.
yeah.
My understanding is that there were nearly 200 or over 200 requests for exemptions. And over 100 requests for people not to be exempt.
Yeah, so Streets Blog did a nice little breakdown of their take on who should and who shouldn't. With very colorful language
Uh,
on exemptions.
and then just one other thing that I mentioned, responses during the public availability period. We will be responding to every comment that comes in, whether or not we're required to.
Okay,
Since there wasn't a determination on that, every comment will be responded to as well, just as the previous thousands of comments. were.
thousands, like tens of thousands, right?
5,600, I believe, was the number that I had heard.
600,000?
Hmm?
600 comments or 600,000 comments?
Oh, thousands.
5,600 unique comments, I believe, is what I had heard. But again, I don't know how that counts the form letter. That's unique, so I don't know how that counts
Form
form
letter, there
letters.
were, I heard like 40,000.
So like,
but-
because there were a lot of different form letters, that only had to respond to one form, so it was 5,600 unique is what I.
Oh,
Right, for example, like 20,000 came from one URL, from one IP address, right?
So I
Right,
felt like that would take, again, one form back, and
Yeah.
so it. I don't know, there are some of those things,
Yeah.
because if a comment was different, but like, you've all seen the postcarding campaign, so you have the same, everyone sends the same postcard. As long as they don't write anything extra on the postcard, they can get the same response, so.
I got it.
so we may be asked to submit positive feedback to that. Rosalind, you've got your hand raised.
Yes, a couple of questions. Lisa, you said you were on the Fair Evasion Committee or whatever. And I read in some of the materials that you guys send us that they're considering down the road using these turnstiles like in Paris to mitigate fare evasion. And I'm just curious, I don't remember seeing to what extent Paris has solved the, fare evasion problems with those gates before we go to that plan.
So there, at the event yesterday, one of the chairs of the commission of the panel was asked, who's the model for that you're looking at? And the basic answer is nobody's gotten it perfect, and because nobody's gotten it perfect. But as the way to cut down on the sieve of turnstiles, changing the design is one of the simplest things, one of the most expensive, but one of the simplest things that can be done. Some of the other recommendations are even easier about changing the design, like putting, this is a technical term, little pointy things on top of the, where people put their hands to jump over, so you can't do that, or putting a bar, so you smash your head if you try to jump. So there are some other lower hanging, less expensive fruits that can be done, but these are the
Modify the existing technique.
modify existing ones, so it could be a combo of both. It's not as sexy and green lighted as the models that are currently, I think they're still in they might still be on display downstairs.
They're not anymore.
Oh, they're not, they were here yesterday, but there's some good photos. And there was a fun moment yesterday when a Post reporter tried to jump over one of them and landed on his rear. Yeah. Yeah, and that was the lowest, gate. I tried to demonstrate my agility. But I do not presume to be that agile. So I know
The Post reporter did presume to be that agile.
yeah, and he's another word that starts with A, but
Work.
no, he's not hurt, not even his pride. So what they did though, Rosalind, was look at different systems, at different turnstiles, and at what has at least cut back on the steady flow of fare evasion.
Well,
So-
I do like the idea that they're considering something that's less expensive, like the pointy things on the turnstile. And my second question is just out of curiosity. I was in the city yesterday, and for me, it's noticeable the smell in the city. I mean, not just the crappiness on the street, but just the air in the city is not as clean as it is when I get on my Metro North train in Larchmont. And I'm just curious, New Jersey makes all this noise about congestion pricing. So my question is, for example, with the George Washington Bridge, do we split the tolls? Like, does New York split the tolls with New Jersey, or how does that work? And last point, philosophically, I'm a little bit, I guess, not supportive of so many exemptions, because I think we get lost in the fact that we want people out of their cars. So the more it costs and the more difficult it is to get them out of their cars and to get them on public transportation, to me, is what our objective would be, because I'm one of those people who wouldn't mind if there were no cars in Manhattan.
Well, that's actually the way that Paris seems to be going.
Paris?
Yeah, they're talking about decarizing, which is probably not a technical term. Some of the center.
Unlike pointy things.
No, right. Let me start at the beginning.
Translate.
So the exit gates are really where the biggest point of evasion happens, at the
Push it.
at turnstiles, the push gates. So they're trying some other really interesting experiments, like a delay on opening. And there's some fun videos. If you push a push gate to open, if it doesn't open right away, people will just go right to the turnstiles to exit, which is what the goal is to get people to exit that way if they can. Even if there's a little sign that says 15-second delay, people push it and walk away. So they do that job. So, there are fire codes that need to be managed there, but making sure that there's a fire code applicable that meets accessibility standards and is also wide enough people with luggage and baby strollers to get in and out and can process pedestrian flow. and throughput. At the rate that we need it is, those are all standards that need to be met too.
Didn't they have the double gate as well?
Yeah, they have the
Demo.
double gate, yeah, so they have a bunch of different demos, and one that was like this, and I was like, oh, this is not for everybody, definitely,
Like some of the airports use those, the
Yeah.
double gates. and those.
right. In Atlanta, I was just in Atlanta and they had some like that, but I couldn't figure out. how
In
to-
Marta
yeah,
or?
in Marta, yeah. As far as the George Washington Bridge, that's a Port Authority facility, so that's the same as the Port Authority, the Lincoln Tunnel, the Holland Tunnel, and not the Mario, because that's why it was built just at the widest point of the river. Right, so it would be right outside of the Port
Right.
Authority, and they didn't have to split the tolls with New Jersey. Is right outside, that's outside of the zone, but those three crossings. I'll go to the Port Authority, and that's supposed to go for their capital planning and for things like that. So while you would get a credit for the way it's currently constructed and the legislation is written, you would get a toll credit for the Holland, Lincoln, Queens Midtown, and the Q tunnels for coming into Manhattan through those paved tunnels, but you get toll credits for them. Right now, it's not the George, which is why people like Josh Gottheimer in New Jersey and now Senator Menendez are saying, oh my God, what about all the people who have to drive over the George Washington Bridge? It's the only possible way we can possibly get into New Jersey. Listen, I go into New Jersey on a regular basis and I have never been refunded for a toll. So I don't know. I mean, I should be refunded. I'm a Jets fan, right? Let me just put it that way. So maybe not this year, but as far as exemptions go, the more exemptions there are, the more it's going to cost, because the legislation, as it was written and passed in 2019, requires that it bring in at least $1 billion a year for the MTA, which when bonded should come to $15 billion. So that if you give everybody and their who has to drive their grandmother into the middle of town at the same time, at the same day, an exemption, because that's another thing we've heard is like, oh my God, my grandmother has to go to the doctor, and they apparently all go to the same doctor. Understandably, there is a real need for medical care, and there are a lot of excellent medical facilities in the middle of Manhattan. But if you give everybody an exemption, then the price of the toll is going to be higher. They did do reductions built in with the mitigations that are baked in, reductions in tolls from midnight to 4 a.m.
Although I would point out that the big research hospitals are not in the zone.
I know, yeah. They're basically started 68th Street or 65th Street, yeah.
Let's not offend NYU in the conversation.
Right. Well,
No, I think they actually,
you can come,
Yeah,
you can come right. through.
besides Langone, like most of them are not.
Right.
And I think Langone actually has. Do they? No.
They have
It's
a
right off
ferry.
the exit.
It's
They
right
do
up
have a
there.
ferry.
I was gonna say, do they have a
I think the
dedicated
ferry-
exit off of the FDR?
They,
Which,
no, but they do have a parking lot under the FDR. You
They-
can get
yeah.
off the FDR, go into the parking lot,
Yeah.
and never exit the zone,
never,
so-
never enter the zone.
never enter the zone. I
Yeah,
mean, it
because you
is
can,
definitely.
the way that it's set
conceivable.
up, that you can actually go to Langone without actually entering the zone, because you actually have to go off one of
Yeah.
the wraparound
Right,
roads.
It is.
Yeah,
it is
back to Rosalind's point. All of these problems are blunted by making us as broad as possible.
Yes.
Yes.
Once you start, issuing exemptions, you invite other people to demand the exemption as well. The broadest you make it, the easier it is to.
Right, they've made it so that it's taxis and for-hire vehicles are once a day.
Yeah.
Which is better, they're having to talk about every time they come in and out, and then
No,
it's,
that would have been over.
so. It's still to be continued, but honestly, this is great news. We may still need your help and support in pushing this through. Well, it's already through, but, in some of the conversations we have with our colleagues and like, well, what do we think about this Menendez proposed legislation? It's like, well, what do we think? What does Senator Schumer think? you know, that's probably not the best person you want to push back on.
Notice that the Rockland and presumably Orange are not happy that.
Yes. Yeah,
Well, they haven't
Orange
heard
has
anything
actually
from
made
us.
significantly less noise.
Yes, they have, because they have probably fewer people that will be affected.
They have more people that use transit than drive.
Yeah.
So does Rockland, but Rockland it's a closer ratio.
but I think that, the fact that the assembly chair for, corporations
Yeah,
is from Rockland, has made a real difference in, the, in the amount of attention paid to the transit options. And making sure that there is as much improvement as possible, so not being, you know, not that I'm cynical at all, but.
is that Rich, iPhone 7? Who's iPhone 7?
It's a different, is it, Rich? So Ross, hopefully that answers your question, but we will, it's to be continued, and if we have more, if you have more questions, feel free to reach out. We were asked by the LARCC to share talking points, in case you're asked questions, and we will do that.
So the plan is to give someone who comes to the Lincoln Tunnel, for example, whatever the toll is on that, I have no idea, but let's say it's $10.
$14.75.
It's 14. Okay.
Well, it's less than easy pass.
But, right, would it have to be with an easy pass. So whatever the toll
I
is.
think it's
you
more
give them
without
the
the-
credit for that amount of payment off the congestion surcharge price. Is that what will happen?
Yeah, there's some math.
The Port Authority isn't contributing a nickel to this, right? They won't contribute part of the toll.
No.
Right.
It's
Either
a
to get squashed
discount, it's not
with,
Correct.
Full-
so.
It's not a full credit, I don't believe.
Oh, not a full
I don't believe it's a dollar for dollar credit.
There's some math, but
Okay.
yeah,
It's like
Are you leaving this at
The
12?
grid's being ready.
I have a couple.
What about?
Can I want to,
discount?
everybody should get it,
Yes.
right?
temporarily, I wanted to talk about our summer trip, our August trip.
Yes,
So we've had this great tour last year, and we've been to Proctor Harbor the year before. I can think of Highbridge, but there really isn't a lot to see at Highbridge. Booster. North White Plains, shop there. I mean, it's traveling for people to go. Is there any interest in any of those three places I mentioned that we could, get the mule who's moving to set it up? In your opinion?
Well, there's a lot of good places on the New Haven too, but they're all in Connecticut, Stanford and New Haven have good shops.
well, I mean, to me, it's also the travel is part of it.
Yeah.
So going
Right.
west of Hudson, across and then east of Hudson is kind of, or east of, doing it over, across and down to see what that route is like is of interest to me too. But that's just, I can do that on a Tuesday,
So I mean, yeah, we could, I mean, it's
but
the only question is the most will working. If it's something that you don't want to exclude you from.
Yeah, no, that's great.
So these are all options we might.
Reach out and we'll.
Okay, all right.
And then we had some questions for Andy that were left over from last month on city ticket. And
Combo ticket.
yeah,
Yes.
that's what I meant.
Combo ticket sales
Combo.
and quiet cars. I think Walter was inquiring about that, so.
And your favorite issue, paper time.
And what?
Paper
No,
timetables.
Oh,
My bad.
It's like, what are those?
I didn't hear what was said. Paper,
Talk a little louder.
yeah, well, you talk louder. I was ready when you talk louder. Paper timetables, I don't remember getting following up on that. I do know that we print some. So I know I've seen them. I know I get them every time we have a new batch, but I don't know where they
We've
are.
got two collectors right here.
Like you see, every other
I think,
suburban railroad of the United States prints timetables except Long Island and Metro North, which are MTA. I mean, SEPTA prints them, MBTA in Boston.
New Jersey
prints them.
Transit also.
New Jersey
I know
Transit
we
prints them.
I know we still print the internals. I don't know if we print the externals
Yeah,
anymore.
no, there's never no external since the income.
And I believe that was purely based on what's being used and what it costs. You know, we talk a lot about fiscal baseline. If we're spending $20,000 on printing timetables and no one's taking them, that is $20,000 that is honestly wasted.
If nobody's taking them, but the people were taking them.
Based on the usage, I believe that's what the,
Every week when I go to the station to fill up the timetable, right, there's always some that are taken. Okay,
that's my understanding is it was a way to, based on the amount of usage that they were getting. Compared to the other resources that we have that have timetables, it was not the fiscally prudent thing to keep printing them. I can continue to ask, but like that.
yeah, I mean, the basic things, not everyone has a smartphone. If you look at them.
It's so easy to take two timetables and have one on the refrigerator and one up in my office. And then when I want to, I can just take it off the refrigerator and read it. Now I have to print this thing out, 6 pages of get it to print in great big print. And it's a huge hassle. I mean,
No, I think though, that, and Mr. X has his hand raised, that it was voted on the board, by the board as a cost saving measure. So maybe it was $1.5 million as a couple of years ago, I think, during COVID.
$1.5 million years on printing is, that's a
But
size.
that would be something that is worth to raise at the board.
I mean, it's, that should go two, maybe mostly issues, the lines. West of Hudson.
At a minimum of,
And, but New Jersey, but the Long Island changes them more frequently, and there's 12 branches, and so it becomes more expensive. Right, I'm not gonna.
so NJ Transit prints them for Port Jervis and Pascagoula Valley, so that's certainly nice to have from them. But the rest of our own main part of the railway.
we have to cut, but think about it this way, we have a $200 million this year and $200 million next year that we're supposed to find ways to reduce from operating costs in order to make fiscal baseline. Adding $1.5 million back, even if it's $7 between the two railroads, for something that is not getting the amount of use, that's not really a prudent way to make sure that we're running financially. And I think if it's something that is of concern, Randy, I would encourage you to bring it up there. But this isn't a small dollar item.
When they first did this, and I asked about it when we noticed this was happening, and I was given a number of $500,000, which was supposed to cover LIRR and Metro North, not $1.5 million.
I
I don't know.
but I think because I do remember it being the board vote, so I think it's worth it being a board conversation
I don't know.
or
Yeah,
a
what do
committee
you-
conversation.
Okay. As I previously stated years ago, regarding both Metro railroads, keep the bigger schedules, dismiss the small schedules, because the bigger schedules tell you everything the small schedules don't.
Yeah, the TDIs, they have. It's fine.
Okay, they can print less schedules. With the two, well, sorry, both railroads have one head. She can place them in the ticket office windows. We'll get into the boards who are working in the windows. You need a schedule, get it from them. You don't want to place them out because you place them out here. Maybe somebody won't take them. Okay, if that's the case, you give them to the employees who are working in ticket office windows. Tell us to get the schedules from them.
Okay, thank you. All right. Let me go. I've done that, okay.
Quiet cars.
Quiet cars. At this point, there's no plan to reinstate quiet cars. Really?
The quiet.
So that's been an issue that's been raised not just by us, but also by the Connecticut Commuter Council. So do you know, why?
Why is that?
NJT has them, and they never remove them.
Robin, she wants to know why
Yeah.
too.
So. My understanding, at least on them, is along with many other things. It it's something that the employees and the unions also strongly oppose bringing back at this time because it creates additional conflict with passengers. And it's not something that they're prepared to or can really want to be enforcing. Conflict since COVID, people are much more prickly about a lot of different things and trying to make sure that there's less conflict between our staff and our riders is definitely something that we would strive for. So based on that, there seems to be a decision that we haven't planned on bringing them back. It's not that it's been a formal decision that we'll never bring them back, but there's no plan to bring them back.
I wish I had one this morning. I don't usually get upset about quiet cars, but I had a guy in front of me this morning. He had his phone on speaker, and he was discussing something about a new mortgage on his house. And everybody in the car had to listen to this back and forth.
I usually talk back to them, I'm like, really, that you're paying that much?
Yeah, right.
I didn't catch your social, can you repeat it?
I know some people who have done some very strange things with this situation.
Yeah.
Like getting the guy's number and calling him, and will you shut the hell up, you're annoying everybody in this whole building. I know somebody who has done that, but anyways.
All right, well, you
Um,
got to.
And Roz has her hand up.
Surprisingly, I'm not going to talk about quiet cars because my solution now is I literally just get up and go someplace else. I did want to mention that I think I've now been on this council, I'm in my second year. And every meeting, we talk about paper schedules. So my question is, would it be appropriate before we take this to some other level for this group to vote on whether we want to continue to pursue the paper schedule? And if the group does, I think Mr. X has an interesting idea where if you're going to print a dozen of them for Walter and Randy, then just have people to go to the ticket window and ask for them because they would be, I really think before we keep pushing this, that we should have some metric on how many people really find them useful and want them to come back. So my only point is, let's resolve this one way or another. So as a group, let's either vote yes or no. And if we vote yes, let's consider Mr. X's idea of printing limited ones and having them ask for them.
You have one more question
Um,
or
which one was that, Jess?
That was it. It was quiet cars. Oh, the combo.
Oh, right.
combo tickets? We don't have numbers yet. We're hoping that they should come out soon. Once we have those, we will share them.
That'll be great.
It's been a conversation that we were talking about, but we expect to eventually get them. But we don't have numbers on them quite yet.
If you can get us station pairs too, that would be good.
I have a question about the combo tickets. I had a complaint, I guess you could call it a complaint. I had a phone call from somebody in White Plains, and he and his wife wanted to go from White Plains to, I think it was Huntington on Long Island, whatever. So they went to the station, they bought a combo ticket, but they wanted to get a senior combo ticket that would, be half price. And they were told, no, you can't do that. We can sell you a senior ticket to Grand Central, and then you'll have to buy another one to go to Huntington. Well, apparently there's
There's no
no,
additional discount on the
Right.
combo.
so for seniors in many, well, I can't say, in some cases, it would be cheaper for them just to buy 2 tickets than.
Yep.
And whether they know that or not, I don't know whether the ticket machines don't tell you that, I don't think. If you put in that you want a senior ticket, I guess it doesn't offer you a combo ticket anyway then, so.
Right.
So there's no plan, I guess, to extend that to the senior discount.
No, there's no plan to discount the discount ticket further.
But those are things that we're looking at as part of our recommendations.
I just asking.
The
Any other
senior ticket is so cheap, I don't really think we need an additional discount. It's a pretty darn good deal as it is.
Well, it depends where you're going. I mean, if you're going to Jamaica, it's one thing. If you're going to Montauk, it's obviously a very good deal, but it depends where you're going.
Hmm.
There's a lot of deals and discounts and ticket prices, and there's like 25 different ones and different combinations, and so it's convoluted and complex.
That it is.
Can you still buy like just one? Can you make all your purchases in one place, like a senior purchase? To get from White Plains to Huntington or something? Or do you have to like hit up a different machine?
I don't think the machines.
That's an interesting question.
I don't believe you can buy an independent Long Island Railroad ticket on a Metro North machine. You can just buy the combo ticket.
The machines are capable of selling them. But that feature has never been activated.
He knows.
Okay.
With me,
Yeah,
I worked this in the training center with some people when we first put these machines in. And you could sell Long Island Railroad tickets from Metro North machines. And so I told somebody at the Long Island Railroad about that, who was very surprised, said, how will we get our money? I said, well, it's all in the family, isn't it? I'm like, come on, but anyway,
these machines are hanging on by a thread at the moment.
Yeah.
So anytime we do a reprogram, it's
I'm just.
tenuous at best,
Right.
just to be perfectly
Yeah.
blunt.
If you look at them funny, they fall apart, right?
So I'm just wondering from a senior combo ticket from, between the two railroads, just being two one-way senior tickets.
Well, I would say, let's wait till Omni, and then, there's a pre-Omni and a post-Omni world, and post-Omni world, I think that a lot of options are. Almost anything is possible.
Is there a timeline for that?
Like 25
24.
now, 12.
And the 24 or the 25.
I'd say, I would cross my fingers when I hold that day.
So regarding those machines, can they be integrated? Since both railroads fall under the MTA, which stands for money thrown away, this would be easier for us to purchase a railroad ticket. and
That's
Metro
the whole
North
point of the
ticket.
Omni machines.
It should be, it could be, but again, I mean, they're out of service a lot, as you know. Right, I mean, we've been asking,
Frequently inactive.
yeah, so, I mean,
They're-
and they don't have enough, like when Grand Central Madison opened, they had to borrow some. Because they don't make them anymore, so it's not like there's a
They're
lot
at
in-
the end of their useful
yeah,
life.
they're not in storage, they're not like hanging
They're not
out.
even manufactured.
The Metro North machines are at the end of their useful life, really.
And the Long Railroad ones.
At the end of
The
the
same, yeah.
third.
Well, they're at the end of their rubber bands and glue, Paper clips, Omni is the answer, we just have to, now that it's being taken over by construction and development and design development and railroads.
Where,
Thank you very much.
That a
for-
much better
Any
job
other
happening
questions before I go?
quickly.
So final question, after you get the Omni machines, what happens? Will it be easier to purchase a railroad ticket at Metro North Station and opposite?
Yes.
Yeah.
You should be able to have
More programmable.
the ability to buy any product at any machine. It's the goal of the Omni program.
So it'll be easier for me to do what Walter mentioned. I'll start my journey in White Plains and then travel to.
Yes.
Well,
Yes, I mean, right now you can do that with our machines, but
Okay.
it's just you can't buy a sole Long Island Railroad ticket from our machines.
Okay, so.
Just like you can't buy an Atlantic ticket.
So that should be
That seems.
getting fixed. And later.
So far, it's been later.
Well, they're working on some of those things as well, particularly with the new. Once the new fares go into effect, there's a lot of hope of getting some things across the board.
One final thing, where you can buy, from where I live, you can buy a ticket on New Jersey Transit Authority. So, thank you.
Well,
very-
that has to do also with the relationship between New Jersey Transit and SEPTA.
Thank you for coming.
My pleasure.
Thank you so
Really appreciate that you came here.
Thank you.
I'll see you. Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Have a nice weekend.
Thanks, me too.
All right.
I would just say that Ross made a motion, I don't know if
Oh,
you wanna.
Do I deal with the app? I mean, sure.
Yeah.
I'll second it.
What do you mean by do I deal with the?
Just discussion before we vote. I mean, Roz, I believe that the consensus was that this was an issue that Randy could bring up on his own with the board, but I'm not sure. You know, we haven't taken a formal position as a committee in favor of this in the past. I don't think, we had the letter
We
once.
wrote a letter
I'm sorry.
once.
And I don't do.
So, I mean, that is the alternative approach, is that, you know, we can let Randy
Just
carry it.
propose it would be a limited number, it's not the great big quantities that they were producing, but a small amount.
And if they run out, they can take one. If nobody takes them, then you have them, and they don't, so.
But I think that Roz's question was,
My
Whether-
objective is just to move this on, because my point is, it's been in this room for the 2 years I've been here. So however way we do it, it needs, it's, you know, I'm just the girl who wants to follow through and take it off the list. So either we vote to go or not go, or we agree that it's in Randy's hand for the board meeting and we can let that go.
Bring it up at the committee meeting, so they could print them in a smaller company.
I can tell you that when I first joined this august body, and I met with Joan McDonald and a few other people like the Westchester County Executive Staff, and I brought up this question, and they said they thought we should have timetables and they would support us if we wanted to argue for timetables. So that was a couple of years ago, you know, when I first came on this group, but
Well, I guess my only point, because I take it from a metric standpoint, that's what I call kitchen research, which I also do. But somewhere in the big world of MTA, there ought to be some way of determining whether that is something that the clients want. And that will determine how much effort we put behind it.
yeah, whether they ever did that, I don't know. What I heard was somebody took it out of the budget to save some money, and whether they thought about who uses them. You know, I tend to think they probably didn't, but I have no
Well,
knowledge of that
we
one. way or
had
the
this
other.
discussion that, you know, this seems to be an interest that they, set a limited quantity of them be reproduced. Okay, we'll move on to the next subject.
Yeah, it does one thing, like, not just time show up in the timetables, but they also have fair rules and all sorts of other things that
Oh,
are
yeah,
important to read about. And, you know, it's not just about the timing of the trains, but also the,
You're
here's how you
absolutely right.
transfer, here's how you do other things and what you can and can't do, and which one's the quiet car. Oh, wait, I'm sorry. I can't hear it.
The rules, okay, you're right, the rules of regulation. Okay, what's next? Social media communication update?
Yeah.
You're on.
So just for monitoring, we only have a few items from the Metro North social media account monitoring. So there's been a lot of really big new ridership records on Metro North. And with that come a lot of reports of crowding and overcrowding, mostly during peak hours on Tuesday through Thursdays on the Harlem and New Haven lines, particularly during the PM rush hour, which is interesting, but also during some non-rush hour Harlem line trains as well. So this is an issue that has been popping up more lately. Also on the positive note, there's new signage on the upper level of Grand Central showing Long Island Railroad schedule times and platforms, which helps with connectivity and transferring. So that got some positive attention.
You know, the signs are completely different.
Yes, it looks very different.
It's
and-
good.
And it should be.
Yes.
Before you move on from that, I mean. Obviously, they were slow to do it, right? I mean, we've
Yes.
had discussions in this committee and CPAC about the wayfinding but once they reacted, they did a very, I think they did a very good job. And they,
More room addition is, it's like
Yeah.
the best thing they could have done to get people down there.
Yeah. You just have to find the billboard.
but I mean, you know, there's a longer term lesson here, right? I mean, this is typical MTA is great at reacting. And, you know, to the point, we can remind them to be more proactive.
Have you been downstairs to see the new terminal yet?
No. No, because I work. Get out the other exit, so I haven't been to.
Well, the easiest way is between 39 and
And the weather's
42, you have the escalator right down.
All right, I'll check it out. I'm already here, might as well.
Yeah.
You hear from the LAR Council, what's the status on crowding into Penn Station? Has that evened out, is that balanced?
So it, yeah. why don't you
Media
go?
stopped talking about it.
It's,
No.
They didn't stop
Oh, I
talking
didn't
about
know.
it. Nope, not really.
I would say that it has, it's much better than that first week that I think got the most attention. They've added cars, they've moved some things around, and I think that it is still an issue, but definitely less than it was in the very beginning.
There was a question at the press conference yesterday, and I spoke to the news reporter afterwards as well. About the trains are so crowded, the conductors can't get through to collect the tickets. And the MTA was like, no, no, they're not that crowded. It's like, yeah, they are. Now, summer's coming. And it's not Memorial Day weekend yet, but it's gonna be Memorial Day weekend in a week. And I think they're gonna find that, yeah, the trains really are that crowded, and they're gonna be that crowded with people who have absolutely no idea where they're going and what these new trains are like and the new schedules. So we're gonna hear a lot more about the crowding on some of the trains going into and out of Penn Station, but also at Jamaica, when people are trying to figure out how to transfer. I will be getting out at Hunters Point Avenue and not transferring at all. But there is some of it has historically been people don't like to ride in the middle seat, right? But the trains that I've been on, I've had to sit in the middle seat in some cases. There are definitely more people riding, and that's what happens when you have ridership records being set. So there aren't, just like with the ticket vending machines, there aren't any more trains lying around. Right, there's no more train sets, so they have everything. That Ryan has taken pictures with some of the M3s literally being held together with gum.
Not exaggerating.
Yeah, so
That's the LAR, Metro North and very good shape.
yeah, the Long Island Railroad, so these
show it to.
these are, it's pretty dire straits that show that the need for more rolling stock in order to help alleviate the crowding, and I think it's only going to get worse, and I'm surprised that there haven't been, maybe there will be conversations about borrowing cars from other.
I try to help the mark lease, and then if they hit it for 1 year, then it was on. But I saw for the first time, all my years of riding by train from Tarrytown today, as I came to Grand Central, I was ready to get off. I saw a young guy sitting on the floor next to the door. He was working on his computer.
I have seen that too.
But that was, and they were middle seats, of course, he wasn't gonna take one. Yes.
So my
Well, the Long
question,
Island Railroad is getting, or M9 cars, aren't they? They don't have the one yet.
Very slow.
49, 48, 49 more cars, but they're
Very slow.
very slow, and they don't have in diesel charging.
so now that the ridership has increased, does that mean service between Jamaica and Long City, service between Jamaica and Long City will still be the same? Because as you know, those lines operate during rush hours only, and that was the case in the last 30, 40 years.
But so, even though, so that's the case for a number of reasons. And that's one of the reasons is because of it's the agreement with the community. There's not a lot of track space there, right? There could be more, absolutely. But the problem that they have there, honestly, is that they let the diesel train sit there and run all day, and the community and the railroad have an agreement that they can only run trains, a certain number of trains in. And I have to agree with it because I live right across the street from there. They're doing a huge Sandy project in that yard. I mean, and it's huge. They moved the entrance to around the block, and it's gonna look completely different. So I don't think they actually have the capacity to bring in more trains at this time. And you know about the derailment that happened last week.
Yeah, with
Oh, there was a derailment going in, it was a FRA safety car. Yeah, which guess what, it's not safe, but there's that on the single track that goes in and out of Long Island City Yard, so there's capacity issues there. So I would say that going in and out, maybe, but Hunters Point Avenue. It is an absolute shame, and I don't understand why they don't have some weekend service there, and there should be. But that's conversation for a different council, right? Roz has her hand up though too.
Yeah, just a couple of things. For somebody who needs to know where elevators are located, is there any assistance on the app? You know, like if you're on a train to know where the elevator is, for example, in Grand Central or in Larchmont or whatever? Because if not, from an accessibility standpoint, it would be helpful if there was some way. I just happened to notice somebody looking, you know, they had a stroller, they were looking for an elevator, and it's like, I know where the elevator is. And it just dawned on me that at some point down the road, if on the app, it could give a person that information, that might be helpful. The other thing I wonder is when I'm riding the train, I notice the train is full, but the middle seat is available. And I'm just wondering if because of COVID, we're less
No,
likely.
people never wanted to sit in the middle seat, even when there was no COVID.
Right,
Like,
but
really
I'm-
middle seat.
I know they never wanted to, but when I rode rush hour trains, I didn't want to, but people, and my only point is now the seat goes empty, whereas in the pre-COVID rush hours, the middle seat would fill up. So I don't know what you do about that. Oh, and they did put in the newspaper recycle bins in Grand Central on the first level. Just for me, thank you very much.
You're welcome. We did that. I wish. So the accessibility, the elevator, information, elevators and escalators on the MTA website, there is information about what is working and what is not working in the subway system. As far as on the, in the rail stations, I don't know, but the conductors should have that information, and there are programs on both of the railroads. There's Long Island Railroad Cares, Metro North Cares programs, that if somebody has a disability, they can make a request in advance for assistance on and off the trains at whatever station. I don't believe it's just for a disability. It may be for, well, I think it's primarily for persons with disabilities. This would be the one meeting with Greg's on that.
Yeah.
Right?
They would know the answer.
They would know the answer. But that, we'll look on the website, but the MTA website, and I looked it up. There's a QR code that you can scan that will tell you where you can get all the information about, and I may still even have it up.
But I guess my point is, have it, because we're going from printed schedules to me with, okay, I need it on my phone. Here's my scenario. I had friends visiting from Florida, and they aren't as agile as I am. I have gone out of the Larchmont train station for a gazillion years, and I never knew all the way down the other end of the track was an elevator. So, and you know, it's like I'm saying, oh, there must be one somewhere, and we kept looking and looking. So all I'm saying is, I know you don't have money to do it now, but on somebody's agenda ought to be to make that information available on the phone, because these guys want printed stuff. I want it on my phone.
Yeah, I will, if it isn't, we'll make that suggestion.
Okay.
In the subways, whenever it's an accessible station, they say the elevator is in the center or at the rear.
On some,
Where there's an accessible
Yes,
station.
on the,
It's either there. In little trains.
yeah, the A-line.
Well, but some of the trains, depending on where it is, yeah, automated announcements on your trains. But there's also signs too that say like boarding here, and it's like blue, there's like,
Yeah.
Boarding area.
blue tape, it says boarding area for accessibility.
Okay, we'll
Back
follow.
back when we had timetables, there was a little wheelchair symbol by
Yeah.
certain
Yeah, but
stations.
you- yeah, but
That
you-
showed which ones
Yeah,
were
but you're
accessible.
trying to find that sign that tells you
That's
exactly where you need. to
Where it
go.
is, if it's in the front of the train or the rear of the train station. That's what you're gonna know.
All right, back to Carol.
Yeah, the last thing kind of related to that is that we saw some instances of the train time app. When people tried to put in station combinations within Metro North, it wouldn't show the train times that they knew existed, but the Metro North account was very helpful in getting those issues fixed quickly in multiple instances. Which is good.
Do we have any information on the account's temporary boycott of Twitter?
It's bad.
Yes.
Well, I mean,
Who pulled the plug? Why was it done hastily? They were back in 2 days. What happened?
No, because they wanted $50,000 a month.
yeah,
So you use their-
they basically said, we're charging you $50,000 a month, and they were like, no, you're not.
Okay, we're not.
They got
Goodbye.
written confirmation from Twitter when Twitter turned around and said, we won't charge you anymore. They got written confirmation that they would be able to depend on the service, and that this wouldn't happen again.
Cause they were charging, not just the MTA, but all, you know, they think they were lumping the MTA in as a, private company. And then based on the customer size is where they were charging their money, basing the fee structure. Which would mean that the MTA would have the nicest house of anybody I knew. But they don't.
Can't believe that's all. I will use it.
But it was,
I use it.
yeah, it was, you know, one of those.
I feel like we're talking being reactive versus proactive again, right? Because the people who suffered during that 48-hour period, whatever it was, one of the riders and the users, there was no pre-warning that it was gonna happen. It was knocked out for a period, and then the MTA, even Twitter got their act together. But again, they need to.
I think that, in that case, I'm happy to blame the MTA for a lot of things. I think that in that case, it was Twitter, I think it was on Twitter. I'm also happy to blame Twitter for a lot of things, but I think in this case that they were really the ones that just said, oh yeah, no, we're gonna, this is what we're gonna do, we're gonna charge you $50,000 a month. And it starts now. And it was like ransomware almost. And they either had to pay up or get out. And their strategy was to say, no, not playing. I don't know that you can sit down at the table with that. With somebody like an Elon Musk who's gonna not used to being kind-hearted and open out of the goodness of his soul.
Yeah, that's it.
Okay, new business? Yes.
So Jenna Lieber at a press conference, some point in the last month, talking about the Grand Central train shed.
Yes,
Have we looked at that as a committee and it seemed pretty dire?
it is.
And again, talking about mistakes that have been made in the past. We just invested time, effort, and management attention in getting Grand Central Madison up and running. Just like 10 years ago, we spent time, effort, and management attention getting Second Avenue Subway up and running. The next summer, we found out that the subway signal system had been neglected. Grand Central Madison opens, and 3 months later, we find out that the train shed is disintegrating. So what, do we have any insight into what their plan really is, and are we going to be baited with 10 years of emergency closure because they're not going to be able to get this thing?
Ray, do you have any insight
No,
into that?
I kind of missed that.
So, it is dire, but it's not gonna fall down. Yeah, we hope.
You can't use them.
Mr. Ryan,
Yeah, yeah.
No, it's the train.
The train shed.
train shed.
So there is a lot of money and effort that's going into fixing it, and it's going into, I think Chase is partnering with them on that.
In the area there, you built.
Yes, we could have at our next meeting is PCAC, where by the way, we've invited Jano to come speak.
And that's gonna be on the first.
Yeah.
First.
And we, I've heard that they're considering that favorably. Our request favorably, as they should. We can look more into that, but I think it might be more helpful to have somebody who's a more.
Yeah, I'm put on it's a new business, I
Yeah.
think, for the committee.
Yeah.
It was a probably intended to be a scary press conference and it was.
Yeah, they do scare well, but it's dire and, you know, one of the reasons that they needed to finish Grand Central Madison when they did was because the East River Tunnel tubes are gonna get shut down because they still haven't been repaired after Sandy. So they're being shut down one at a time. And that means that traffic in and out of Penn Station is gonna be limited. So they needed to do that, and while that's happening and trains are coming into Grand Central, the work for Penn Access is gonna happen. So the Penn Station has to be done by the time Penn Access is done. So it's all a bunch of Jenga, you know, blocks that are being put together, which means that the train channel needs to be shored up and done too. And a lot of this has been due to, you know, not having enough money. And then some of it is because of the funding hasn't been allocated in ways that perhaps prioritize things as people think it might have otherwise been. Should have. But we'll get more information on that.
Well, there's also a plan to rebuild, I think, the Park Avenue Viaduct, or at least parts of it. And this was done some years ago, and they did it by taking one track out of service at a time, and it seemed to work pretty well. One of the consulting engineers who got involved in this had told me that they have to take, he thinks, now this is just what this guy told me, they have to take 2 tracks out of service at a time. I don't know how you could run the railroad doing that, but certainly the peak hours anyway, but if you hear anything more about that, please keep us informed on it.
They'll have a service plan, but we will
Yeah.
do that. Okay. Is there other new business or do we want to see if, is Rich, is that you on iPhone 7?
Yeah, yeah, I've been on.
Okay,
Can you hear me?
yes, yeah. Are you able
All
to
right.
provide an update?
Yeah, I got 2 updates. The transit-oriented city, the new one for Harriman,
Yes.
they came in to the planning board this month, and we should get a revised site plan of what the complex is going to look like next month. So it's a pretty large document, about 90 pages. And I'd like to send a copy to Jessica, and maybe she could forward on to the council members. And we can have a discussion maybe in June or July.
Not June.
July.
Yep, great.
And then as far as the low bridge signs, the Village of Woodbury has ordered them. There was an agreement between Metro North, I guess the capital project manager, I forgot her name. And they're on order. And as far as the new LED signs at Metro North, I'm not sure if that's been finalized. These are the ones that would actually go on to the abutment of the bridge. And so when the trucks come by, you know, they could clearly see them. I haven't gotten an update on that yet, but the village has ordered all their signs, and I'll let you know when they go up.
That's the Village of Woodbury, you said?
The Village of Woodbury, yes.
Great, thank you.
There are 3 low bridges between 10.4, the height is 10.4 to 11 foot.
Super. Great. In Harriman, did you make any progress in meeting with the officials there, or are they hoping that the station improvement will come with the TOC?
Well, I did receive a letter from Mr. Poor, who was, I guess he's not the Orange County representative anymore, right, Randy?
Oh, it's not. No, he stepped down.
We did.
And they said, and what I saw a response from the Metro North president that they were gonna put it in next year's capital to renovate the shelters like they did in Nanuet. I haven't followed up on that, but when does the capital budget come out for next year, Randy?
In the fall, I think. I think in the fall, after the 20-year needs assessment should come out. Maybe that comes out in the fall, and then the budget comes, the capital plan comes out next year.
So that's what she said. She was gonna put it in there, but now that they're building the TOC, which could accommodate anywhere from 2,500 to 3,000 people adjacent to the train station, maybe they should rethink how many new riders that would attract, and maybe they have to redesign the shelters. I don't know. You know, that should be under consideration. You don't want to replace the shelters that are there because they're too small. They could hold about there are two, and they hold about 15 people each. 15, yeah, about 15.
Right.
So I'll bring it up at the next meeting. Is it going to be, if it's going to be in the capital budget, does it make sense? Or does it make sense to wait till the TOC site plan is finalized, which I got I believe that they're going to make a contribution to the shelters.
Right, you're right. If there was a jointly funded project or a fully
Yes.
funded project, that makes it even better. Then
Yeah,
they could make it
Yeah.
look like they want to.
Yes. I'll find out now. I'll get back at the next meeting.
Super, thank you.
all right.
Okay.
Thank you very much. All right, so as I mentioned, PCAC on the 1st of June, and then we all get together on the 20th of July. And we'll talk about where we want to go. To go on the Zoom in a few minutes.
Yes, if you all have ideas about that trip.
Yeah,
let us know.
please send it anyway. I mean, there's
Spring
no,
Valley would be interesting.
Which one?
The yacht up there, to ride the
Where?
line up in Spring Valley. That's not much up there.
there's nothing
Yeah,
to see.
not enough.
It's too small.
There's nothing to see.
Well, finally, we had to get that Donphin built.
And you're better off either with North White.
Yeah.
Close to get Brewster.
Hybrid should be.
It's really not in Highbridge, is
Yeah,
there are 5 trains there. I mean,
That's
if
true.
you want just to have a short one, we could certainly do that.
Yeah, so
So
nice
we could go
facility.
back and go to lunch afterwards. That's an easy one to do.
Whatever.
We have 2
We have
trains
a
an hour.
station right there. You can get right there.
2 trains an hour that stop there. So, all right, so what do we do? Everybody okay with doing Highbridge? All right, so please, we didn't have the date for that. All right. then.
While we're here, I just mentioned one other thing that's a little bit outside of my domain, but I mentioned a couple of months ago, some people in Croton on Hudson and Ossining, complaining about alleged noise from the Harmon Shop Complex. And they're leaving me alone now because I can't do anything for them or don't want to. But in any event, there's now, I got an email the other day, was you had a big poster about this. And also in my local supermarket, there's a poster, there were notices all over the place about some kind of a meeting. They have a website and they're apparently getting very serious about this. I really have no idea if this is a honest, legitimate complaint or not, because I don't hear these noises. And they say in certain places you hear them. But Metro North knows about this, and I've tried to feed them what I can about it. So just so you know, this thing is out there and hopefully it will be resolved.
Go in. Okay. All right, so I thank you all for coming. I make a motion to adjourn.
I move we adjourn.
Second. All right, we're done.
Thank you.
I have a board briefing.
Okay.
That's my.
Got it.
That's my.
Thank you.
I'm gonna be on. One.
120. So I gotta go to Penn State
Okay.
I'll be back here, but I don't think I'll be on the 120. Okay.